Here we are. We're coming on live. Welcome and good evening. My name is Douglas Hagren, and welcome to tonight's educational presentation, Strategies for Saving On and Not Just for College Costs. Before we get started, a little bit of housekeeping. First of all, if you've got a pen and a piece, no, I've got some people saying that they cannot hear me. Raise your hand if you can hear me. Okay, good. All right. So it may just be an internal technical issue, but it sounds like everybody else can hear me. That's good. Okay. So thank you. Good. I was just being told by someone on my team that they could not hear me at all. So thank you very much for those of you that have responded saying that it's coming through loud and clear. Good. So a little bit of housekeeping. If you have a pen and paper, there's going to be some notes that are going to be very valuable. You may want to take as we go along tonight. And I'll prompt you on some of the key things I think might be valuable to you, but I'll be talking about a lot of different stuff that you may find valuable as well. And second of all, you may have some questions as we go forward this evening. If you do have any questions and you're familiar with how to use Zoom, please click on the toolbar and use the Q&A section. The Q&A section is the section that is going to be on the toolbar. There's a chat section, there's a Q&A section, and the Q&A section is going to be the better place to put any of those questions. The way we're going to be able to see them, they're organized. Sometimes when things go in the chat, they just scroll through super fast, and we're not able to see those there. So, okay, so we're going to go ahead and get started, and I want to welcome you all for being here this evening. But basically, just to know that this information that we're going to cover tonight, first of all, is general in nature. Seeing that everyone's personal financial situation is complex and very, very different. Okay. Due to this, we're going to offer a complimentary consultation to anybody who's attended tonight to take 30 minutes, one-on-one time to review your specific and individual situation. And we'll discuss those details of the consultation later in the workshop. Again, it's complimentary, but again, everybody's situation differs from somebody else. All right, I'm just going to put a little note to my team here that you guys can all hear me because they're still saying that they can't. So, all right. All right. So moving on from that, also wanted to let you know that college is obviously a huge investment. We know that you're here because you're probably looking at those costs and concerned about what that's going to mean to you personally. And also, it's extremely confusing. Admissions and financial aid is a complex minefield, and there are a lot of things that can go wrong in this process that can lead to not so great outcomes, and that that can really make this exciting time in your life end up being something that unfortunately turns out to not be as great as it could possibly be. But before I get started, I'd just like to share with you one quick story of what brings us here together and why I love what I do. My story really begins back when I was, going to college, and a lot of what I learned going into it, I kind of had to revisit it again because when I was 25 years old, my father passed away. And when he passed away, my sister found him and he never woke up. And she was a freshman in college. So I had to spend this time figuring out as a 25-year-old how I was going to handle a massive estate. It just complexities, not size, but ultimately trying to deal with all of these things. And at the same time, he had no plan to get my sister through college. So we had to figure out how to scrape up whatever we could to get her through the next 3 years of college. It's one of those things where when life was going on, he was just kind of paying for it and working it as he could as he went along. And unfortunately, all of a sudden, the snap, everything changed. Okay. And ultimately, life goes fast. A lot of things happen. There's this certainty of uncertainty that's always going to come into people's lives. And I certainly hope that this doesn't happen in your lives. He was only 53 years old, but ultimately, this really drove me into wanting to be able to be in a position where I could help others to be more proactive about what they were going through in life and ultimately be able to, handle and understand ahead of time estate, handle and understand, financial planning, handle and understand so many different things, and especially what we went through just trying to figure out how to get my sister through college. So ultimately, this really is the reason that I got into the business, and I love what I do. And I'm excited to share what I've learned over the years, as once I got into this business, we found there was significantly more things that we needed to know. And ultimately realized that advisors and other individuals out there that were helping people in all these facets really weren't telling people what they needed to know and how to do it right. And that's led to some pretty, ominous surprises. So listen, I just wanted to say that's why I'm excited to share what I've learned. And thank you very much for allowing me to share my story with you. If you want to know any more, feel free to ask me if we have a conversation and follow up. But moving on today, what I'm going to do for the next hour is I'm going to show you what we've discovered and empower you with the knowledge that most of you probably haven't heard before from research that you've done or a financial advisor that you've been working with, if you have one at all. In fact, according to the hundreds of attendees of the education sessions we've run and spoken to, many have also told us that they have not heard much of what we're going to cover tonight before. So you will want to get that pen or pencil ready that I talked about, and a worksheet or a piece of paper. And I promise you that it's going to help you better understand how to plan for college in ways that will begin to ensure that what you have desired the most, a happy and successful child who goes to a great college, who's able to find scholarships and get financial aid, and most importantly, allowing you to keep your promises to your loved ones, and then which is, paying for college without going broke. The current landscape of college is really important to understand. It is absolutely expensive. As you can see here, the current cost of a four-year college education for a public school is about $100,000, and private is about $235,000. Now, there are many schools that are, that fall higher or lower than these numbers, but ultimately only about 40% of freshmen enrolling in college also graduate 4 years. So these are 4-year numbers. And if you go 5 years, 6 years, ultimately that's going to make these numbers increase significantly. Over 500 colleges now charge more than $50,000 a year, and that's just for one child. So it's no wonder that 73% of parents with children under the age of 18 worry about college funding more than any other financial matter in their life. So let's start with some brutal truths about college costs and the impact on families. And as you just seen, the average 4-year cost of a public university, almost $100,000, and private college is about $235,000. That's the 4-year average. Only about 60% of freshmen are graduating in 6 years or less. So we've said about 40% graduating in 4 years. Of that, only about 20% more are able to make it through 6 years. So this is becoming an exceedingly high burden on families. And today, a family can easily exceed college costs of $250,000 for one child. According to a recent Sallie Mae report, 60% of the families that were not saving for college said that the reason they weren't saving is they don't have enough money. To bridge the gap of college costs and available resources, families are taking on more and more student debt, which significantly curtails both present and future financial opportunities. Now, let's take a pause here and really talk about what this is. College planning is a retirement planning conversation. What I have found in all of the work that I've done is that, and the research that I've done, is that most financial advisors are not helping you with college planning. So I'm going to assume that you are working with someone. If you haven't done a plan, you should be really getting a plan put together to figure out ultimately how to achieve your financial goals. But even those working with individuals are not getting that help, and that is potentially severely hurting retirement. According to a Forbes article from 2019, there is a severe lack of preparation amongst financial advisors to assist clients with college planning, and they often lack specialized knowledge about college planning options, funding options, financial aid, tax efficient strategies for saving and education expenses. Those knowledge gaps can lead to a suboptimal college planning outcome for families seeking guidance from financial professionals. According to the Journal of Financial Planning, families actually face increased financial risk in the event of unexpected circumstances, such as job loss, disability, medical emergencies, all of which can impact the ability to meet both short-term and long-term financial goals. And this isn't, I want to make this really clear, this isn't just for lower income families. The journal addressed the issues facing affluent families. These can result in depleting savings, retirement accounts to cover education expenses, ultimately jeopardizing long-term financial security. The CFA Institute wrote that funding education expenses without proper planning can disrupt estate planning goals, lead to unequal distributions amongst heirs, diminishing intended legacy. Listen, more and more articles are coming out and publishing on the impact of college expenses on the wealthy, from U.S. News to CNBC, the Federal Reserve, even the IRS. So it goes beyond financially, too. The American Psychological Association wrote about the stress and mental health issues it's having on families of all wealth levels. So I really wanted to take time on this because most people think of college planning as this isolated thing. It's one factor, and it really ties into every other ultimate financial goal you have. So ask yourself this. If this is so critical to your financial outcome, has this been addressed? And if not, and your financial plan that you may or may not have created was exposed to unnecessary risks that came true, under what circumstances would you want to tell your child they can no longer go to college, or they'll have to drop out, or take on huge amounts of debt, or find out someday you have less than you need to live the life you want to live because college costs took all that away? And my guess is none of that. That's why you're here tonight. And that's what we're going to talk about tonight, the things that you need to know that you can begin to do today to remove the unnecessary risk of college to both your child and your own retirement and financial future. So paying for college, let's start with this. Before you even get into the financial side of it, it is an extremely emotional concern of parents. We love our children. We want them to be as successful as possible, and many of us are willing to sacrifice pretty much anything for them financially. Fact is, many do, even to the point of jeopardizing the retirement savings. As I said, even the wealthy, as the previous research showed, who may have more money to start, but then are often forced to pay more by those top schools, especially when they don't have a plan to do so efficiently. And often they also, let's face it, have higher lifestyle expenses to support now and later on in life from finite resources that can run out. So the question is, will parents be able to accomplish both successfully, or will they be forced to choose college funding at the expense of their own retirement savings and financial goals? This slide here is going to give you a little bit more context. It talks about the opportunity cost. This is really important to understand. And so write this down, opportunity cost, grab your pen, of paying for college versus saving for retirement, both for a public and a private university education. At 15 years, it shows the amount that you could have had in your retirement savings if that money had not been used for college costs at all. Using $100,000 total in 4-year costs, $25,000 invested each year, at the end of the year, and then accumulating for the number of years left until retirement. So, for example, the first lump sum investment would accumulate for 14 years, the second for 13, et cetera. No matter how financially secure you are, every dollar you spend on college without a plan is a dollar that could potentially be lost forever. In fact, we've done the research on this. Based on average potential rate of return you could have gotten on money that you would have saved or invested, it's possible that every dollar you spend on college will be $8 lost from your future. And I know that may not seem like much, but let's think of it this way. If you spend $100,000, it could translate to about an $800,000 loss of wealth in the future. And so when you look at the screen here, so you look at the 15 years, $100,000 college, at 15 years is about $234,000 of future opportunity cost. And this gets confusing to a lot of people, but what it basically means is that's the interest you would have earned that you lose. So again, it's really critical to go into this with a plan. And now imagine, as it says here, what if only 53% of freshmen enrolling in college graduate in 6 years or less? Compound that. We're talking potentially the impact of millions of dollars, or at least $1 million for many families if they don't have an efficient plan to pay for college. And that's just for one child. But listen, I know I got to talk about the ominous news and the frustration and the concerns and the risk out there, but there is good news. Most people think, and most professional advisors included, that college planning is just saving for college. In fact, good college planning is all about saving on the cost of college. The more informed that you are, the better equipped you're going to be able to make smart, informed, and prudent college admissions, planning, and funding decisions. The result? You get to send your child to the right college for the right reasons and at the right price. How's that sound? Now we're going to cover the basics. Let's start here. This is another time where it makes sense for you to maybe grab that pencil and write this down, because there are 3 important terms you need to know: cost of attendance, SAI, otherwise known as the Student Aid Index, formerly known as the EFC, which was replaced in 2024 for colleges that use FAFSA, and demonstrated need. Cost of attendance, or COA, means the amount of money total that the school is charging on their price tag before any discounts. And this is going to include not only the tuition, but the fees, the books, supplies, room and board, transportation, anything the college says that they have calculated you may have to pay to send that student there for a year of college. Okay, so that's the starting point, and this is the price that most people see. SAI or EFC effectively mean the same thing, just how the term, when the terminology is used. It means ultimately the amount of money that the schools, through FAFSA, or sometimes there's another form called the CSS profile, determine that they think you can afford to pay based on income, assets, parents' age, and a number of different things, about 6 to 7 different calculations that go into that. Okay, so this is what they think that you can afford to pay. This is why you're filling out FAFSA. Now, demonstrated need is the third one, and that is the amount of cost that schools will consider potentially providing financial aid to you for, based on how much they think you can afford to pay, based on what their total cost of attendance is. Now, there's a 4th term I would like you to write down. So we have cost of attendance, SAI or EFC, and demonstrated need. The 4th term is called net cost. It is the most important thing that you can know, and that is the amount you will actually pay. It's the real number you need to know after any financial aid discounts. Now, as I said, SAI or EFC, schools that that use the CSS profile, which is a form that's generally used by about 400 or so colleges, mostly private, a handful public, they are still going to use the term EFC. So you want to know SAI, EFC effectively mean the same thing. Calculations are a little bit different, but if you hear those terms, you can assume interchangeably, they basically mean what they think you can afford to pay. So if you look at the slide here, if the cost of attendance is $60,000 and your SAI or EFC is $45,000, then because that SAI is lower than the cost of attendance, that creates the demonstrated need of $15,000. And that would be the part that the schools might consider giving you any level of financial aid discount for in that case. Now, if that SAI is higher than the cost of attendance, no demonstrated need, and that becomes a different situation. So that student aid discount, or student aid index that we're talking about, is basically created to determine that financial need, cost of attendance minus SAI. Colleges will figure this out, and then ultimately, and again, through your filing, they will determine. And here's the thing, every school is different. Some schools give incredibly generous help for the demonstrated need that you might have. Many schools out there, oftentimes public schools, just don't have the endowments, the money out there to provide a lot of help. So even if you have demonstrated need, the school that you choose to apply to could have a very different level of help to you than another school, which means it's really important to understand behind the curtain how much different schools are willing to give if you have a demonstrated need number that could be eligible. So if we're going to go ahead and use the SAI terminology in this example and assume that both public and private colleges are going to use FAFSA. So we're not going to get too tricky here. And by the way, if you want to write that down, FAFSA, that's the federal form. Almost every school starts with that. Like I said, CSS profile is a second form you may need for only about 400 schools. But in this case, okay, this is a cost of attendance of 22 for the public university. SAI is 15,000, the same in both cases because it was FAFSA. Financial need for that public university is 7,000. The private university, much, much more expensive cost of attendance. SAI is the same. It's 15,000 because that's based on your income, assets, etc. Now, the financial need that's demonstrated there because of the higher cost of attendance is now 45,000. This is a starting point for out-of-pocket college costs, not the cost of attendance of the college. You need to know this because of what I'm going to show you here on the next page, which is now a very good example of one of the students that we work with and their financial aid package. Okay. See, now we're going to start with that cost of attendance of a public university. Again, that SAI we talked about is going to take into consideration that there's a 15,000, the demonstrated need was 7. We already talked about that. This student would have been eligible for a $5,500 federal student loan, which every student gets, no matter where they go. It's given to anyone. And the unmet need in this circumstance, which is the amount of that demonstrated need the school would not cover, is $1,500. Okay, so as I said, every school is going to cover a different amount. Okay, so ultimately, this school is going to cost about $16,500 on a $22,000 cost of attendance because the school helped a little bit, but even though the demonstrated need was 7,000, they only helped with roughly about 5,500. So they kicked 1,500 back to this family to work with. Now, the next demonstration I'm going to show you is a private school. Again, started a lot more expensive, $60,000. And ultimately, that's triple the cost of the public university. And a lot of families will stop right there and they'll never consider a private school because that's what they hear, that's what they see. Private colleges are so much more expensive. But look what you're seeing here. The exact same methodology. We already determined that because of that SAI being 15,000 in both circumstances, the financial need is much higher. The demonstrated need is much higher for the private school because their cost of attendance is that much greater. But in this school's example, because they're private, because they have a bigger endowment, they are able to provide a complete support and financial aid for the entire amount of that financial need. So you take that $60,000 school, which started almost $40,000 more expensive, you wipe off, or they did, wiped off $45,000 of cost, and ultimately the total cost was just the SAI for the school, a $15,000 cost. All of a sudden, you can see how a private school can be less expensive than a public school if you understand the process in which they use to create these calculations and determine that need. So therefore, do not discount that there are a lot of schools out there that may sound more expensive, but at the end of the day, they could end up costing you less than the school that sounded inexpensive in comparison. And in this example, that more expensive school is $1,500 less. And as it turns out, because the family EFC and the big difference in the ability of the private school to meet that financial aid of the family, the school that appeared to be out of reach for the family was actually more in reach and it's going to cost them less out of pocket. I kind of explained already, but the reason the private schools may often cost a family the same or less is, first of all, if they want to keep getting students to attend it, they'd have no choice. They don't get any tax revenue. They have to attract students who would ordinarily go to a lower price school. And if they don't, they eventually go out of business. Also, there are many private colleges in competition with each other, and they're looking to enroll many of the same students. Therefore, they use these discounts to compete in getting the students that they really want. Private schools, as well as state schools, do have endowments. Some endowments are larger than others, and some allow more of it to be used for financial aid. They will use them to offer more money to students that they really, really want and can use more of it in a bidding war. And this happens if you understand how to play this game, which we do. You can position yourself to be in the best possible opportunity for a bidding war between multiple schools based on understanding how those schools look at each other and the competition for a student. Because private schools use more of their endowment dollars for financial aid than state universities typically do, and because it's their money, they can do what they want. It's not the state's money. It's not the federal government's money. They don't have to follow any financial aid rules. They can do what they want with it, and they can give that money to whomever they want, and they tend to, in reality, give the most to better students. But that's relative because better students obviously are going to be dependent on who's looking and enrolling in those schools. And at the end of the day, they have tremendous flexibility to match other schools' financial aid offers. Seen situations many, many times where a school says, hey, I know you're looking at these schools. Send me the offers you've got. Look at them and say, you know what, we're going to match that. And you got to be careful in how you approach that process. Schools don't like to be, told that they're negotiating. Again, there's etiquette, there's timing to this, but it can definitely work in your advantage if you know what you're doing or have the help from someone that knows what they're doing. So let's talk about some tips for reducing costs, right? First of all, understand that the financial aid officer works for the school. They are not working for you. Their job is to protect the assets of the college and ultimately give away as little money as possible. If they have all the students they need, more than they can actually take, there is zero incentive for them to give away any money possible. Mac, and part of the problem that people run into is 85% of kids apply to the same 50 schools. Those big name, commonly known schools typically don't have any reason to give coupons and discounts because they have more than enough applicants. Your job, though, is to use the rules of financial aid to make your contributions to the college as small as possible. That's according to Coleman Chaney, the author of Paying for College Without Going Broke, someone who might have a little insight on this process. So again, you see a lot of stuff out there, and maybe you join some chat rooms. I've seen it. I've seen it very common. There's some groups out there, like online through Facebook. And I've seen financial aid officers sit there and say, look, you should just talk to the financial aid officer because they know the most about how to help you. Again, their job is to protect the college. They write their paychecks. So if you don't have the information and you don't understand how to make those best decisions and get it as small as possible, they will take advantage of you. It's kind of like going into court and using the other person's attorney. So how do you get a discount? All right. First of all, when the student is at the top of the applicant pool, the odds of getting a discount go up appreciably. Okay. When a buyer colleges, this is something we look at. There's buyer colleges, seller colleges, and buyer colleges are colleges that use tuition discounts and increased financial aid awards to buy or induce students to attend. Therefore, you are much more likely to get generous scholarships or tuition discounts at a buyer school. We will rank those schools when we're talking to families. Sellers, on the other hand, are less likely to get a significant financial inducement for the student to attend. They tend to be more selective colleges. Therefore, they don't need to use those price discounts in order to meet enrollment goals. The sellers, let's call them the haves of admissions. They're overwhelmed with the applications. Many of them from top students. Everybody thinks they want to go there for their future, and therefore they don't need to buy students with any tuition discounts to fill their classrooms. Most sellers offer financial assistance only to the students who really need it financially or are truly exceptional. Now, the buyers, will call them the have-nots in terms of admissions. Although they might provide a superior undergraduate education, rather than select a class, their admissions officers must actually go back and work really hard to recruit students, and they must discount tuition through merit aid in order to fill classroom seats and in dorm rooms, okay? And again, look at it from this perspective. what they are trying to do, and this is something called enrollment ratio. They send out offers. They get a lot of students that don't come there. So they got to send more offers. How do they even the playing field? By giving those discounts. So you're going to want to include buyer colleges on your college list. So therefore, you're also going to want to expand your universe by looking at colleges beyond your typical home radius that most, many, maybe not most, parents and students impose on themselves. You're going to find a lot more options. Okay? If you're flexible, if you cast a wider net, some schools like a geographically diverse student body, and they'll actually offer a discount to attract students from beyond their region to come and attend. The next thing that you're going to be able to do is create leverage. Okay. And we talked about that. This is a term, it's relative to every college and every student. By applying to competing schools, the greater chances of a discount and getting a better one if need be. By including buyer colleges that we talked about on your list, you're going to be in a better position to use an excellent aid offer from one of them, or maybe even multiple offers from colleges as a bargaining chip to try and get top schools to sweeten that pot a little before committing to the top choice school. Okay, so the next thing is you are going to want to complete financial aid forms. It is something every parent should do. So if you are listening tonight and you are one of, we'll just consider yourself one of those affluent families that makes too much money to get a discount, you are still going to want to go out and fill out those financial aid forms. Go out and fill FAFSA. Because the reality is that some schools out there won't even give you merit scholarships unless you fill out FAFSA. We're seeing a declining number of families that are filling them out, often citing, I'm probably just make too much money to get aid. And then they leave tens of thousands of dollars per year on the table in potential merit aid because they didn't go and fill out FAFSA. So no matter who you are, no matter what income level, that is critical. All right, take out that pen again. I want you to write this down. The 3 sources for paying college costs. Number 1, it's free money. Okay. Number 2, it's what we call cheap money. And number 3, it's going to be the resources of the family, whatever you can do, to including loans. Okay. So ultimately, it's other people's money. Okay. That's the thing here. So the goal of planning for financial aid is obviously to increase free money. Since need-based financial aid is driven by your EFC or your SAI, you're going to want to evaluate all legal and ethical ways to possibly lower that EFC and then ultimately increase your financial aid eligibility. You have some control over your EFC, and in some cases, significant control. I have worked with families that, based on their situation, we were able to get them from $100,000 SAI and eligible for no financial aid down to situations in which they were paying no more than $10,000 to $15,000 out of pocket and having everything else written off because they planned ahead. Many families miss out on merit aid as well because they don't know what's available to them or exactly what is required to obtain those scholarships. Merit aid scholarships are not, let's be very clear here, they are not just for the top students. Okay, they can be for many things, including talents, sports, athletics, music, arts, lots of different things can get merit aid. Looks like my camera just moved on me. Sorry about that. All right. So what do these do? These are going to reduce your need for loans. They're going to reduce your gap. Okay. Now, if there is a gap, many families turn to debt to pay those college costs. And in some cases, that can be strategically advisable. But in many cases, especially if you do it without a plan, it can significantly raise the total college cost. So reducing the gap first via financial aid planning can have far, far-reaching advantages. Okay. Now, once you submit FAFSA and or the CSS profile, you'll significantly curtail your ability to increase your aid eligibility based on the EFC. So you're going to want to be very careful before you submit it. You're going to want to make sure that you understand all of the steps in the process and make sure you do it correctly. Okay. So first of all, determine ahead of time what forms are going to be required by the schools. You're going to want to determine ahead of time how the EFC is calculated and what's being assessed and how much. And ultimately, what planning strategies are available to you to implement that are both prudent, good for your retirement planning, good for your saving for other goals and things that you want to do, but at the same time can also increase your financial aid eligibility. And there are options out there that can absolutely support your ability to do both, save for retirement and reduce that gap and ultimately increase financial aid eligibility. So if you know what you're doing, it can save you thousands of dollars. And if you don't do it correctly or don't know what to do, it can cost you thousands of dollars. And I want to say this again one more time. Planning for financial aid must occur before you fill out these financial aid forms, because once you turn it over to them and they have that information, it is much, much more difficult to get that revised after the fact. There are processes to do it, but they've already seen it. And once they've seen it, then you have lost a lot of power in the negotiation. Okay. By the way, Department of Education says 93% of FAFSAs have errors. So if you're lucky to be one of the 7% that does it on your own, congratulations. But the fact that that many have errors mean this is a critical, critical step. And a lot of people find value in getting help to make sure they do it right and double checking that the right information is in the right places. And also what kind of planning can be done to legally and ethically be able to be in a position to have less information shared with those colleges. Okay. The next thing is the student aided income also matters. So beyond, there is an annual allowance value. Currently, it's about $7,000 that would be assessed, but ultimately anything above that's going to be about 25% and increase the EFC by the calculated amount. So you're going to want to understand student income is a huge effect. Also, if you take capital gains, make sure you can offset them with an equal amount of capital losses, because they will look at any capital gains as income. If you are getting a year-end bonus, ask about possibly giving it to you before January 1st of your first base year or the first year that's going to be asked by the colleges to count in that SAI. Okay. Now, ultimately, good question. I see a good question that went into chat. If you could put that into the Q&A for me, that would be great. I'll be happy to answer that near at the end, but thank you. Keep those questions coming. Okay, so ultimately, there is a change in 2024 that happened by the Department of Education to the formula for calculating the SAI. Okay, so retirement account contributions now, huge. During your base years can actually significantly reduce the AGI for taxes and the SAI. That wasn't the case before. So that may result in significantly increased financial aid opportunities at selected colleges. A number of variables will be considered in determining the effect of financial aid eligibility at selected schools. But this is where an analysis of your financial situation and your schools of interest are needed. It's a great opportunity here to maybe take an opportunity to have that conversation with us or another professional if you know one, but we'd be happy to help you and ultimately take a look at if there's any opportunities to look at how to reduce your future out-of-pocket college costs and also improve your retirement savings outlook. This is a significant change that they put through this year. Another thing that you're going to look at is charitable contributions. If you're charitably inclined, accelerating charitable contributions could cause you to pay more tax in your base years, and you may not end up paying more tax overall, but the tax you pay in your base years is deducted from your EFC. So the more tax you pay, the lower your EFC. I know that was probably confusing, but the IRS, the government sees this. They're like, look, it's our money. We don't want to necessarily see that go to the colleges. So the more tax you pay, the more that reduces your SAI or your EFC. So be careful with charitable contributions. The timing on that, it may help you on taxes, but it may hurt you. And a lot of tax advice that I see families get from tax advisors and also from financial advisors end up having significant problems with regards to paying for college. If you're working with someone and you're planning for college right now and they're advising you to do a rollover, they have no idea about college planning because a rollover can contribute to a significant spike in your SAI. So I can't stress this enough. Make sure, as I said in the articles before, you are working with someone that truly understands college planning. And if they don't understand college planning, then ask yourself how much they understand how to do your overall planning altogether. Now, there's also one more thing I want to talk about, the same strategy with IRA contributions. Unless you're already making your maximum contributions to your retirement accounts every year, retirement account contributions are added back into the EFC or SAI formula during the base year, and the reduced income tax, again, increases your EFC. That is tax-deducted IRAs. Certainly, Roth IRAs, that could be a different conversation depending on how you want to use it. All right. Another great time to take that pen and pencil and write that down, because I'm going to tell you some things that you're going to want to know that are assets you can have that are not assessed by the Department of Education. We talked about the impact here and there. Okay, first of all, you have to be careful with how you do this. You can't just label a savings account as a retirement account and exclude it from an assessment, okay? There's very specific laws about what can be considered an excluded asset, so don't just make it up. Right? But you can see here, retirement accounts, they are excluded. Personal items. This could be the great time to buy that new large screen home theater system or things you need to buy anyway, because they won't ask for those assets. If you had the cash, it would count. Spend it, it's not there, no longer counts on those items. If the school is using the CSS profile, you can pay down your equity when appropriate to reduce your EFC, because it is ultimately, they do, the CSS profile does look at home equity in a house. Not all schools requiring the profile will assess your equity in the same way. And that difference, though, can cost you considerably in your out-of-pocket college cost. One of the things that we look at for families is, especially with those CSS profile schools, which ones are likely going to count certain things and which ones are not. Remember, it's their money. They can decide. And many of them are not very transparent on what they're counting, but we have the research and the information and enough to know a very strong idea of which schools are going to count what to help you find those schools that are going to be the most generous. Understand, too, that if you have life insurance, I talk to families all the time that have different types of life insurance, especially cash value life insurance. This is also excluded from assessment. And you actually may be able to use those funds to help pay for college. Some people talk about them. It can be a very powerful strategy for planning for college or using funds that you've already built up for college. The withdrawals from a cash surrender value and death benefits are going to be reduced by the loan outstanding of unpaid interest. So you got to understand how those things work so that you do not end up having a policy that's going to terminate. By the way, cash and annuities is not assessed by FAFSA 2. So if you have annuities out there that you funded, you would not want to use those funds necessarily to help pay for college in most circumstances, because there can be penalties or income assessed from the use. There are some circumstances where it can be extremely valuable to you as well. So again, these are just a good list of items here that may be usable as assets that are not going to be assessed for you for the AFC and the SAI. Now, I do see some good questions coming in, and I promise you I'm going to get to those. Great questions. All right. Coming back to the knowledge piece. What you don't know, the more you're going to pay. Okay. First of all, gifting money to a child may reduce financial aid eligibility. A lot of families like to go through these strategies, especially affluent families. For example, a grandparent gives $15,000 to the grandchild for college. That actually may cost the family thousands in lost financial aid because of how these formulas assess the gift as an asset to the student. So what's your strategy? Think about doing it after college to gift. Maybe use that money to help pay off student loans. Now there's no lost financial aid. The cumulative benefit of implementing a variety of the strategies that I've just touched on today can actually yield a greater real savings to a family on the total out-of-pocket college than just the financial aid. And these strategies are more predictable ahead of time and under the control of the parents, as opposed to being controlled by the school with respect to financial aid. In other words, start sooner to get these things in place if possible. It's never too late, but you can see that schools are going to look at merit-based scholarships or tuition discounts for high-income families, because you may be wondering, where can I get this? I'm not going to get financial aid because of our financial situation. Merit scholarships, tuition discounts available, but also saving strategies, cash flow strategy, income, asset planning strategies, strategies for business owners. We've helped a lot of business owners with that. You can actually get some incredible tax deduction strategies with regards to your own business and how you look at paying tuition. Strategies for grandparents, tax credit strategies, gifting strategies, loan strategies, etc., all of which are things that can be used and potentially valuable circumstances for high income families to create not only ways in which you could get a lower cost, but ultimately ways in which you can maximize the overall financial plan on paying for college, and in many cases, reduce other unnecessary risks like taxes. Now, what about saving for college? Where would you use it? Ideally, college savings vehicle would have all these characteristics listed. Flexibility of use is a great benefit. So a 529, that is certainly an option, but it's not a one-size-fits-all solution for clients. Ultimately, we have a document, we have information that we can provide on a comparative analysis of 529 to other accumulation strategies to understand if that is the best option for your family. There's multiple ways that you can save. And again, that would be a great conversation potentially to have one-on-one about uniquely your circumstances and ultimately what might be the best option for you. The last thing I want to talk about here, at least in this component, again, another good time to take out your pen, is mistakes to avoid. These are costly mistakes that can hurt families, and they can lead to thousands of dollars in lost financial aid and tuition discounts and lost wealth. Okay, I'm going to write these down. I'm going to go through these fairly quickly. But first of all, mistake number one is, as I said before, thinking your income or assets are too high. A lot of people mistakenly assume they won't qualify because they earn too much, have too much. Sometimes that's the case, but often because of a number of factors like divorce or unusual expenses, number of children, taking care of aging parents, or the college just has a different criteria, then you could actually earn up to $200,000 per year and still get need-based aid. I think that answers one of the questions that I've got. What's considered high income? Ultimately, the FAFSA thinks, over 100,000 could be high income, but you could still get ultimately lots of opportunities for financially, even up to $200,000. Don't just guess, don't just assume anything when it comes to financial aid eligibility. For families that won't qualify for need-based aid, there's always the need to still fill out FAFSA because you could keep yourself eligible for merit aid, which has nothing to do with need-based aid. But not filling out FAFSA and losing that could cost $1,000 in college costs, okay? And again, we'll reveal why and bigger circumstances and bigger impact to you if we have that free consultation one-on-one. Okay, now I want to talk about kind of what it looks like on that FAFSA. So you can see here in this case, the information we have on record for you is $29,517. That means this person won't be eligible for a Pell Grant, but could be eligible for other financial aid, right? This is actually a student aid report for a family of $290,000. Okay, the schools selected by the family have costs of attendance in excess of $50,000. So in this case, they're going to have significant need-based aid in this circumstance. Okay, so what is mistake number two? That is going to be rushing through the process. There's no need to rush. The key is to do it correctly. We have a process when we work with families, okay? And we want to make sure we go do it correctly. Accuracy matters. Mistakes can be extremely costly, difficult to correct. Just meet the deadlines and you'll be fine. The next is applying for fewer than 6 colleges. If a student applies for fewer than 6 schools, you're not creating competition. The odds of a good aid package are much less than, if they apply for 10. This more colleges apply to increases the odds of getting a really good package that can then be used to leverage a better one at another school. Which schools to apply to? These must include buyer schools that I talked about before in the list. And again, we can help you build that buyer list of knowing which schools are buyers versus sellers based on what your child is hoping to do. Mistake number 4 is picking the wrong schools. It's imperative you pick schools where your child is in the top 20% of incoming freshman class with respect to GPA and SAT or ACT scores. And by the way, they are coming back as required. You're going to see more and more of that. Although schools give financial aid based on calculation of need, they will definitely give what we call preferential trade packaging, aka more money versus loans, more free money, to the students who lie in that top 20 to 25% of incoming class. The reason they do this, they want to attract those better students to their school. You should use this to your advantage. And mistake number 5, assuming all financial aid is the same. All schools are not created equal and will not be able to give this family the same financial aid packages. Some schools are well endowed. They get lots of money from alumni and corporations. These schools could end up, have more money to give out. They're generally able to meet most of a student's financial need at their school, and others don't. So it can actually end up costing you more money to send a child to that cheaper school we talked about before if they don't have the money to meet your need. You should know the school's history of giving money before applying, so you're not disappointed when you get a bad financial aid package from your from your child's top choice. Now, next mistake is going to be what we call mistake number 6. And that's not knowing the financial aid formulas that determine the SAI. If you don't know how financial aid is determined and you know the difference between included income and assets and non-reportable income and assets, we talked about some of them before, for the purposes of filling out financial aid forms, you should, because where you keep your money matters. And if you don't know how legally and ethically to position your money properly for the purpose of financial aid, you could just end up losing thousands in financial aid. Mistake 7, it's not applying at all. Actually, this could be the number 1 mistake. Lots of parents, for lots of reasons, don't bother to apply. The big mistake here is because, as I said before, many colleges won't give you any merit aid unless you file the forms. Yeah, they're a pain. We have jokes about what it takes to fill out one form versus the other. Yes, they're confusing. They're counterintuitive. Yes, they can take hours to complete, but they must be filled if you want to get free money. It's worth the time. And if some unfortunate event takes place, the college has your information and is in a position to help you. Mistake number 8 is using your CPA or tax preparer to do it. And unfortunately, they're great at what they do, but they're not experts at this. They're experts at tax planning and preparation, not financial aid planning. Example, a CPA or a tax preparer might suggest you put all of your assets in a child's name to save money on taxes. Well, it might be well-meaning. It actually could kill most or all of your chance of getting financial aid. Also, many CPAs or tax preparers are not trained in filling out financial aid forms. In many cases, they unknowingly filled these forms out improperly, and even minor mistakes can be expensive ones. Mistake 9 is going to be responding to a college offer too soon. Now, this might seem counterintuitive. You're excited. You want to get in. But don't respond to a college that sends you a financial aid package first. Instead, wait until all the packages came in from other schools that your child is accepted to, have arrived, and then been evaluated for fairness, which we can help families do. Your strongest leverage is your competitive package from a similar caliber school. That aid package could be used as that bargaining chip to get a better deal from your first choice school. And mistake number 10, foregoing professional advice. If you were to be sued, even for $10,000, most people would contact a lawyer. They wouldn't likely call the other person's lawyer. Talked about that before. So that's kind of the school, is the other person's lawyer. If you had a tax situation, you'd want to consult the CPA, not just reach out to the IRS. So why then, when faced with one of the most expensive purchases of your lives, do parents all of a sudden want to be financial aid and admissions experts? And I'm not saying you can't do this yourself. You absolutely can if you're willing to become an expert. And then you'd only be practicing on yourself. Practice is for making mistakes and learning from them. You don't have the luxury of making mistakes in this situation. So consider the advice of someone knowledgeable who can help you through this process to achieve a good outcome. And maybe that's us. So it's imperative to file FAFSA. Ultimately, even if you can't see the ability to pay, if the school can't see your ability to pay, which is revealed in the financial aid forms, they have no other way of knowing what the family's financial situation is and ability to pay. Let those schools see the other schools you've applied to. It works to your favor. Leverage those schools against each other to sweeten the spot. So ultimately, file FAFSA. When you file FAFSA, you put that information on you. You put the information about schools. You let those schools see those schools you're applying to, who their competition is. They want full pay clients, and they will use those tuition discounts to attract them. Those parents ultimately, if you contribute to endorsements, booster programs, highly desirable to colleges, and they will compete for them. Okay. The forms are means for the family getting the best deal. Okay. So you're going to have that information is going to go on there. You're going to ultimately want to make sure that you're providing the information that's going to allow you to get not only need-based aid, but merit-based scholarships. And these often require those financial aid forms. Now, let me share you what other advisors are not telling you about how the admissions and financial aid process actually works. Okay, good place to start is some context. When a college-bound student reaches their junior year in high school, the family begins entering into this daunting college selection admission process. It can include a myriad of actions, which include identification of candidate colleges, application process, applications for financial aid, the requisite forms. Even the Secretary of Education says you basically need a PhD to figure out what the forms. There's financial aid awards. You got to evaluate, negotiate those awards. You got to final college selections and award acceptances, strategies for covering any shortfalls. Each step along the way is associated with its own complexity, stress, mystery, and headaches for the family. Missteps or lack of knowledge along the way can cost you thousands of dollars. So in order to maximize success along the way, it's going to require time. It's going to require effort, patience, expertise, all of which are generally in short supply these days for busy parents of college-bound children. Here are just 3 outcomes that can easily occur based on mistakes by family and lack of knowledge or not knowing what to do. So ultimately, if you look at these 3, lost aid discounts, the mistakes 1 through 10 I mentioned, strategies for covering shortfalls, but choosing the wrong school or curriculum, this is the single most important reason for setting up a comprehensive plan and for leaving no stone unturned in preparing for college. Avoiding this will save many thousands of dollars. Okay, so you have 2 choices. To wrap and summarize this all up, you have 2 choices. First of all, you might ask, can we just do this ourselves? Absolutely. So long as you're willing to become an expert on the admissions process and the impact on financial aid, as well as the thousands of pages of rules, regulations required to take full advantage of the process. Each family is unique, and it takes an experienced financial aid specialist to know how to advise you. With the cost of college as high as it is today, it really doesn't make sense for a family to enter into this process alone when viable, cost-effective alternatives exist. If someone were to be sued, as I mentioned before, you would not want to just go and contact the other attorney. I'm not saying you can't do this yourself. You can. And then ultimately, you want to make sure that you are doing this in a way to minimize your mistakes. Now, ultimately, there is a second process. You can have hands-on support coaching for the family as your student enters into this process and completes it. Okay. Given the current economy and the competitive nature of college admissions that are out there and financial aid, parents can greatly benefit from targeted, strategic, and tactical guidance to achieve the best outcome throughout each stage of the process. Parents of college-bound children can now benefit greatly from experience, expertise, coaching, hands-on support that will help navigate a process successfully and work towards the best possible outcome for not only you, but your child. And through effective strategic and tactical planning, you can become an informed buyer of college education. Tactical planning would include college admission strategies, financial aid forms process, funding strategies, cash flow strategies. In other words, paying the gap. Ultimately, this is a critical decision into trying to figure out all of the ways in which you could potentially give yourself opportunities to drive this cost down and have the least impact on your financial future. So what are your next steps? Well, if you set a time, I've got Veronica on here. We want to reach out. We're going to go ahead and give you here on the next slide a way to reach out to us, and we'll put it in the chat. But during your free consultation, if you choose to take it up with us, we'll discuss your child, your goals financially, your goals college-wise, objectives, obstacles, and where you currently are in the process. It's our goal is really, as I said before, there's a passion, if you can't tell why I do this, what I've went through, what I've seen, what our experiences with my own life, but also with families. It is to help you achieve a great outcome for your student and for your finances. So what's important to your family? We've found in this process that parents look at the process with concern. Sure, you want your child to be independent. You want to be happy. You want to be successful. Many are under the assumption that if their child doesn't get into what they think of as the right college, that they won't be able to succeed. So finding a college can take on special meaning. And of course, what parent doesn't want their child to get lots of scholarships too? Now, they might have said to the child, you do the work, we'll figure out a way to pay for it. But now the reality is starting to sink in, and they may be rethinking that process. And they'd like to keep that process without sacrificing their retirement. It may not always say it, but what parents really want is help. So what are the costs of waiting, procrastination? Fewer college choices. That will be less opportunity to get them to compete with each other. Fewer cost reduction strategies. That will mean a bigger gap and more money you're going to have to come up with. Fewer college savings and funding options, less places that you could potentially put your money in order to reduce the cost or build your savings or help you pay for college. As I said, a larger gap, that means more debt financing, less available retirement savings, increased stress. Student may have to settle for a lesser option, crushing student loan debt, and more. Nobody wants that. So ultimately, how do you schedule your free consultation? Well, first of all, I want to say this. If you're going to meet with us, both parents must attend the meeting. You both have goals. You both have thoughts. You're independent people, but together you're doing this as a family. We want to make sure that we talk to you and understand the concerns of both. And ultimately, how do you actually do so? I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to take this here and I'm going to put that information, the information slide on, on screen for you to go ahead and allow you to be able to click on it in the chat. So let me grab that really quickly for you, and I will put that in here really quick. Here it comes to everyone, and there it is, that 15-minute free consultation. It's actually probably about 30. I've now put it in there for you. So now I'm going to go ahead and answer some questions. I did see a couple that popped up in the chat there. If you have any others that are that you have an interest in, please do me a favor and put those into the Q&A. I am just making sure that I bring this up here again. And ultimately, so I got a bunch of great questions from one individual that came in here. Can you increase 401k? What are the base years? Okay, great question. So I'm not really sure I understand the increased 401k part. There are limits on how much you can put in a 401k based on the IRS. So can you increase it? Yes, up to the IRS maximums. What are the base years? That's a great question. The base years are the years in which FAFSA or the CSS profile is going to calculate your information. And this is going to start about 2 years prior to the child attending college, or basically it's going to be the prior and the prior year to when you file FAFSA. So a senior is going to file generally in October or thereafter of their senior year. And so what is it going to be looking for? It's going to be looking for information from the taxes from the previous year and from 2 years prior. They're looking for a pattern. Now, if it's a CSS profile, they're going to be looking for the prior year and estimated of current year. So they look at some things differently. Okay? So that would be something to consider, because they're really what they're looking at is those tax returns. So when it's going to hit those tax returns. And again, I caution, rollovers during this period can be disastrous. So if you've been encouraged during a time in which your child is going to be going to college to do a rollover, then you may want to reconsider whether or not your financial plan is being fully thought out with the best benefit to you, because it could eliminate your opportunities for financial aid, at least based on need, depending on your situation. I also get a question here about paying off home hurts SAI and EFC. Having investment home, does it help or hurt? Great question. These are two different things. So FAFSA does not count your home equity, your residential home. It does count any type of investment real estate. So if you have a second home, or whether it's a cabin or investment property, they are going to require you to report, and they're going to count the value of that property based on the equity in it. It's under, some people used to be, again, before 2024, you could actually make it into a business. Businesses under 100 employees were not counted on FAFSA. They are now. And that was because so many people were using real estate as a business to circumvent this. So yes, if you have additional real estate, every property will be counted. Now, CSS profile schools, as I said, there's about 400 of those schools. Those schools, they do look at home equity, but not every school will count it. So again, depending on which school you look at that uses the CSS profile, we can tell you which one of those schools is going to be likely to be a seller school versus a buyer school, and which one's going to count that equity or less. So hope that helps. So if it is a CSS profile school, paying off your home would increase the equity and therefore impact and lower or raise your SAI or EFC. If it's a FAFSA school, your residential home would have no impact there. Got a question. What's a definition of high income family? Well, as I mentioned before, I think I already answered that. It's going to be basically generally in many cases for the school, it's going to be 150,000 or more is what considered high income. But it's really a subjective question. It depends on a number of circumstances, on a number of goals. But ultimately speaking, would say that once you started getting it, especially into the $200,000 or more range, from the purposes of FAFSA, you're definitely in consideration of a high income family. But ultimately, if you're looking at kind of taxes and estate and other complex issues, you're probably in that range. How do you know other schools you apply? Great question. When you file FAFSA, you're supposed to file an attached list of schools that you're applying to. Also, many cases, it's just through communication with the school. So if you're applying to school, you should have a decent dialogue with that school. Let them know you're interested. That helps in that preferential. They like your student. They know the student likes them. But you can kind of mention or bring that up in certain strategic circumstances on what schools you're looking at, in a way with tact and etiquette that can get them to understand. There's a great example of a family we worked with. They literally were talking to a school trying to get financial aid. They said they got more from, there was another school. They were struggling in a situation of trying to make a decision. That school literally said, well, who did you apply to? Okay. And now they already have that information through FAFSA, because FAFSA is the public filing and you're supposed to attach your list of schools to FAFSA. But they asked them to explain it. They also asked them to send them the awards. And once they looked at the awards, they actually matched them and then gave them an additional $5,000 a year to seal the deal. So great situation for them. Now, I appreciate all those questions. Thank you very much for firing those away. I hope I've answered them. But if you have any additional questions on that, please go ahead and click on that link and set up 15, 30 minutes. We'll talk about your specific questions and situation. And ultimately, I am seeing that I've got some time off coming up when these webinars. I got a lot of people signed up. I'm starting to see times on my calendar go. I'm seeing a few people tonight have signed up. So if you haven't grabbed one of those spots, please jump on it. Otherwise, I don't know if we're going to be able to get to you here in the next couple of weeks. All right, so we've got a couple of other questions here. Looks like Fernanda, thank you. Can you email a presentation? Yes, I'll be happy to share that. Absolutely, you'll get a copy, a recording of this. We'll make sure that that gets sent out to you in follow-up from this. And I also have a question about cost of our services. It's probably cliche to say it's a range, but again, I'm talking to someone who we're just going to do a quick consult, couple $100, just to kind of answer a couple questions with them and put into place a couple things. We have full packages that we're going to do, that's going to have a lot of one-on-one service, going to bring in a team to help help work on a number of different complex situations. So that cost of service is going to be, we do have packages. They can be tailored in any number of ways. It's the range generally, as I said, for many cases, it's going to be, anywhere from a couple $100, but, for some of our more complex cases, it's several thousand. It just depends on the help you need. So that's a great question. And again, and I'll be able to answer that question much better if we have a conversation and understand what your complexity is, what you need, because I can't really answer that until I know what kind of work or help that you desire. So thank you for asking these questions. I believe that I've answered everything that I see so far. So I'm going to go ahead and, unless I see another one pop in, and I'm going to go ahead and finish my spiel here just to wrap up the night. So if one pops in, I'll answer it. But listen, I know this is an emotional and it's a financial decision, and it's one of the biggest decisions in everything else that you're planning to do financially for yourself and your own goal and the extraordinary life you're trying to create for your children and yourself. Wherever you are and wherever you may be, I wish for you that extraordinary outcome. And if you want our help or would like to have a conversation, we look forward to it. But no matter what, I hope that this journey that you're on and will be going through will end up being an incredible outcome, and that your child jumps into this world and thrives. So I wish you all the best. And for those of you that I have seen sign up, or those of you that may sign up here soon, I look forward to having a conversation with you soon. So thank you very much for joining us tonight. I hope you found it valuable, and I wish you a good night. Take care.